Hello, and welcome to our webcast, Cloud Professional Services Study 2012, A Pathway to Cloud Services, highlighting the results from our recent Cloud Professional Services Study. My name is Allison Crawford, and I'll be your host for today's session. Tech Business Research's focus is to provide business research to accelerate our clients' success, and this webinar is a part of these ongoing efforts to find new ways to support you and your business, get the most out of your research investment. During this session, cloud services is one of the areas attracting customer interest and real investment dollars, representing an important opportunity for vendors in the IT space to generate growth. This is one example of the topical research around which we will connect our readers with our analysts to rate the results and insights from our cutting-edge research. Through these activities, our goal is consistent: to provide actionable insight into the market and competitive strategies that translates into competitive advantage for clients. 45 minutes, Senior Analyst Ramunas Svarcas will look into the trends driving the results featured in this recently released study, followed by Q&A of these trends and how they will affect you. Before I pass this over to Ramunas, there are a few logistics I'd like to cover. We will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube channel, TBR channel. We want you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Ramunas will address them at the end of the presentation. Or, if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to Ramunas at the end of the webinar with a CC to account executive to set up that discussion. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can find the slides, as well as our other thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. Now let me introduce Ramunas Svarcas, Analyst and Engagement Manager in the Professional Services practice. For the 7 years, Ramunas has covered the IT services market. Depth of knowledge has helped our large services clients plan their strategic roadmap, increasing their profit margins and lowering their risk. Ramunas will leverage his insight into this webcast to give you deep clarity on the state of the cloud services market. And Matt, let me hand this over to Ramunas.
Thank you, Susan. So slide number 2, and the question is, what's going on out there in the marketplace? The cloud definitely shows us that change is the only constant in today's global marketplace. Changes in professional services, with changes in what customers will need, and we're also seeing how professional services vendors are reacting to those changes and are attempting to meet the demand that's being created for them. The presentation is really to understand that the cloud services market is evolving on a daily basis. Ongoing developments in cloud services, it's very important to be aware of what customers want and need from a professional services perspective, and what vendors are delivering and where there are gaps in the services. Get into the summary of the results of the study. I want to just do a couple of quick housekeeping chores. Okay. On slide 3, we quickly wanted to give you a feel of what we're actually looking at from this Cloud Professional Services study. We look at cloud and the overall cloud market really as two separate markets: cloud professional services and then cloud services themselves. Software service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, as well as business process as a service. Today, we're really going to be on the professional services side of the marketplace and what's going on there around cloud services. Two markets really are very intermingled and working very close together with each other. In cases, we believe that cloud professional services it acts as the precursor to companies engaging cloud services. But in other cases, it's certainly the converse has been true, where cloud services have been purchased and bought, and then professional services firms are brought in to help make sure they're working properly, or there's changes that need to be made in their organizations. Housekeeping, the next slide gives you a quick overview of what we actually did in this study. This professional services study really examines the vendor strategies and how they align to the market dynamics. Understand what customers want and need. So we conducted primary research during the second and third quarter of this year. We viewed over 1,300 enterprise clients, with the focus here of really talking to ultimately and digging beneath the covers in terms of those that are actually buying professional services. So for many of the sample sizes you'll see of the people and the responses that we analyzed with the study, we're really looking at a smaller base of this 1,300 because we wanted to understand the incidence of cloud and cloud professional services purchases. This time we wanted to get a good feel for those that actually are purchasing. What are their expectations? What are the benefits they feel they're receiving? What do vendors serving these various customers need to know and do to continue to be able to serve them in the best way possible? So the research actually we focus on talking to companies with over 100 employees and over $250 million in revenues, or $250 million in annual budgets. When we talk to some of the public participants, public sector participants, virtually half of the population that responded to our survey had revenues in excess of $1 billion. So we're really talking to the large enterprise clients for the purposes of this study. We include enterprise customers both in the U.S., in Europe, specifically Germany, France, and the UK, and in the APAC. And we really wanted to understand what's going on in the APAC. We had done a study earlier for the APAC back in 2010, and this really, and we didn't do it in 2011 because we saw that the take-up of cloud services and cloud professional services not quite very high compared to the Europe and U.S. markets. But we're seeing that is changing now pretty dramatically. So this is the third iteration of our cloud professional services study. Five of the biggest professional services firms have purchased this study. Several have purchased multiple iterations of the study, and one actually told us right up that the information provided was invaluable for them in focusing their offerings and their market strategy in the future. So let's study. Slide number 5. The professional services market is changing. Customers are much more aware of cloud service capabilities, and really now with the help of professional services firms are starting to move towards implementation. So 2 years we saw quite a bit of cloud services being purchased as line of business managers. That has not disappeared completely. That certainly still occurs many times with firms that may be somewhat considered laggard in the cloud adoption phase, but not the approach that the large enterprise clients now are looking for. The large enterprise clients really, over the last 2 years, gained a very strong understanding of the cloud, what cloud services can actually do, and subsequently are leveraging that knowledge and then looking at the professional services firms to help them begin implementing cloud services specifically. So the market is changing. It's shifting from education to what cloud does and what cloud is, to what cloud can do for me, and ultimately, let's start doing it. We evaluated the costs around cloud and understand now much better the value of what cloud services. So they're leveraging the advisors and experts to bring implementation into their organization, drive the cloud services from within. Impact of that, on slide 6, we actually see what's happening in regards to just cloud services. There's been a significant uptake here from our perspective. The whole change here is that cloud services consumption has rapidly been escalating in the U.S. actually approaching levels seen in Europe. The Euro market, we believe, has been trying to, play catch up. It is suffering a lot of issues from the debt crisis and the overall economy there. So companies and customers within that marketplace are looking for solutions that are cost effective and they can reduce their costs in terms of delivering their own products and services. And cloud computing does improve that and helps that. Within cloud services, on slide 7 we see what's happening in the cloud professional services market. Not surprisingly, it is also moving upwards, and more clients are purchasing cloud professional services. When we compare this to what happened back in 2011, we saw a little bit of a fall off in engagement. This now has righted itself, and we're back up on a growth curve from a cloud professional services standpoint. But not only are there more engagements being occurring in the marketplace, but we also feel that the size of the engagements are growing in size and scope. Basically, when you move to implementation, integration, you need more resources. It's a much more expensive engagement. It takes a longer period of time. But it is the next step in terms of the process. One of the I had not noted on this slide is, I did not include the APAC region here in a comparison of 2011 because we didn't look at that specifically last year. In comparing to the results of 2010, what we saw that back in 2010, in terms of a combined group, the U.S., Europe, and APAC regions, 59% of the enterprise customers purchasing cloud services. Figure has risen significantly up to 66% in 2012. Not surprisingly, also for cloud services themselves, when we looked at the three regions combined in 2010, only 49% were actually purchasing cloud services. Again, jumped to 60% in 2012. My jump is attributable to the APAC region in terms of growing and being very interested in cloud services and then leveraging cloud professional services to get themselves up to speed. So it certainly is suggesting that the marketplace is changing and moving forward. On slide 8 is a representation of where we believe right now we are on the cloud professional services adoption curve. This is actually a numeric representation. It's really just sort of a positioning from a marketplace standpoint where we believe the whole environment stands. We've seen engineering consulting services, having done their job, and companies are now moving into systems integration, applications development, implementation. We're also seeing some take-up on the management side. The early adopters, the very early adopters, are looking now for cloud professional services firms to help manage, maintain, and operate their cloud and services environments. There are still there are still customers along the overall curve. We see still, late adopters trying to figure out what they need to do. They're still looking for advisory services and consulting services. Try to make a decision. At the same token, on the tail end of the other side, you're looking now at firms that have already adopted, that are really starting to try to figure out how can they further leverage what's available from a professional services standpoint to really provide them the management and maintenance of their cloud environment. So looking in more detail as to what services are actually being purchased, we go to slide number 9 here in the presentation. Overall, here I've provided also the APEX, since we're not doing a comparison to 2011. We're seeing that, from a professional services standpoint, over 57% of the market really purchasing professional services. And this is in the previous presentations that I've done on cloud via webinar, we were looking before really at what companies not just purchasing but also evaluating cloud. So some of these percentages may look a little bit lower than what was previously presented earlier this year. These are the people that are actually purchasing. And cloud services, which is about half of this chart, there's quite a large number of enterprise clients purchasing cloud professional services. What's really here to note is that the APAC region is actually leading in terms of share of purchases. It certainly looks like the APAC region has kicked up dramatically, jumping from in the low 40% range in 2010 up into this 80% range. Looking in more detail, we see that, in fact, systems integration has overtaken consulting in terms of share of the purchases that they're occurring across all the regions. And not surprisingly, software as a service still dominates the market as the type of service that most enterprise clients are really looking for and look for assistance from a cloud professional services standpoint. So what's the impact of this on cloud professional services vendors? And slide number 10. Dramatic growth. We have a change in share in the number of engagements that are occurring for cloud professional services. It's rising in somewhere in the range of 5 to 10%. In this revenues for the professional services firms are expanding well in the excess of 30%. Wanted to note that for the state we really looked closely at 11 of the vendors, the largest vendors in the study, and these represent the actual revenues on this chart represent the sum of revenues for those vendors. Certainly there are far more Indian-based vendors playing in the game. We only really looked at 2 specifically here, but we very much that these percentages and growth rates of the vendors that are pretty much entrenched and leading in the marketplace represent the overall market from that perspective. So we're also seeing here that the systems integrators that have product portfolios are the largest in terms of revenue, and they have the largest revenue base in cloud professional services at the present time. The gap is closing with those systems integrators that are really more or less vendor agnostic, do not necessarily have a hardware or a product or a software platform in play. And base vendors are really growing the fastest because it was really starting from a very small base. Excuse me. What's driving this growth? Next slide. Customer demand is shifting. Cost reduction, while important, really is moving towards and trying to leverage IT resources to develop individual customers' businesses, grow the revenue stream, reduce costs, essentially move some of the business processes away or out of the organization, and leverage cloud and the cloud services to do so. The big becomes, which vendor do I choose and how do I make that decision? And that brings us to slide number 12. Do enterprise customers need and want in 2012? We definitely ask the various enterprise clients, identify what are your key concerns, what are the key pain points, what's driving, what do you expect from a benefit standpoint, and where are you looking for help. So the concerns that service, and this was pretty much across the board, revolved around security, education, data ownership. Recognize that cloud does potentially reduce your security unless you go into a private cloud environment. looking for professional services firms to help them with the security issues. Is really to help them better integrate and implement in a much faster rate cloud services that they're looking to buy, and overall to looking at it from an infrastructure standpoint of how they can improve their IT infrastructure. One of the key expected benefits is increased productivity. Users to be satisfied within the organization of the respective companies that we're looking at. At the same time, they need to, the whole cloud environment and with the help of the professional services firm, to be able to provide the right information to the right person and really at the right time. Specific business processes that they're looking for help in were identified as customer relations management, desktop productivity, and analytics. Something that is driving a lot of attention right now, given the explosion of data in the marketplace. So, cloud services kind of relate to these various expected benefits and needs. Software as a service, we're looking at specific software platforms, specific software models that can specifically address the needs on the tail end here. In terms of infrastructure as a service, certainly addresses and helps address the overall security, data location, and ownership issue, focusing on backup, and then likewise looking at business continuity and disaster recovery. And in terms of increasing speed to market, increasing the development of applications that help within the IT infrastructure that can help the company then themselves grow and improve and get better. The platform as a service really into the area where increased productivity is being driven as well. Obviously, a development platform, it can help clients move much more rapidly and quickly. And on the same note, where professional services vendors can consult and assist clients in leveraging these platforms, and they've received from that perspective that if they can then provide them the platform as a service themselves, there are ensuing implementation integration projects that will be forthcoming. So go on to the next slide. Is that vendors are listening. In our discussions with the professional services vendors, we're seeing a lot of change in the marketplace in terms of what professional services they're actually bringing for potential cloud service buyers. They're also looking at and reacting to changing economic climate, recognizing that there's a lot of pressure in Europe to provide value service, really provided at the lowest cost possible. So the vendors are developing their own internal tools and processes to help maximize that. But the clients really are creating an interesting scenario and a changing dynamic in the marketplace. On 14, from our survey work, we basically asked each of the respondents to identify whether or not they were purchasing, applications development, maintenance, consulting, or business process, or services from the cloud professional services vendor, and identify which vendors they identified as the primary vendor that they were purchasing from. iBuild looks, it still is pretty much the leader here in the marketplace. Average 25% of the respondents indicated that IBM was one of their primary vendors for one of the services. But down the list here, and this list has expanded pretty dramatically from the work we did in the previous year. To make some changes in the way the survey was administered, actually creating a drop-down list of all the vendors that were mentioned in our previous year's studies. So it made it a little bit easier for the respondents, but what surprised us that we saw some of the software vendors jumping into the play. We believe that, as the migration occurs and from the stack and, people are examining software as a service, then looking to platform as a service, develop and customize and do some of their own applications work. Ultimately, to put all their IT infrastructure out there on the cloud as an infrastructure as a service and really move away from the CapEx-intensive scenario to a more operating expenditure scenario. There's more players entering into the marketplace, and more players are being recognized as capable of providing professional service, providing the guidance, helping with the implementation. Additional systems integrators, with the hardware portfolios that had the infrastructure, knew a company's infrastructure. While they know quite a lot about the company and what's working in there, went into actually looking at what kind of workloads are being moved, how best to move them, how best to leverage cloud to run those workloads. They're starting to turn to even further specialists, such as the software firms, who definitely know their software and know what it can and cannot do in a cloud environment. So that are being identified as the primary cloud professional services vendors certainly is expanding and growing. And as I mentioned, what surprised us is we saw Microsoft and Oracle outranking even some of the hardware players in terms of the services, professional services play here in the marketplace. And we believe that they're doing a value-added software solution and then really coupling that with a professional services solution. So taking the next step, what else are the vendors doing to continue to succeed in the marketplace and grow? On slide 15, provided here just a little of what's happening with regard to one of the vendors that we covered in our professional services vendor analysis of the cloud professional services market. You see alliances and the number of alliances surrounding this company is quite expansive. And these are important. What we're seeing in the marketplace is that, in fact, cloud computing really creates a situation where the customer, has to go through a secondary source and work then with a technology developer, which in fact basically lessens vendor lock. We believe is very lowering vendor lock-in. Customers have gone through the exercise of understanding what clouds can do. They've gone from the proof of stage into a much more area where they're actually now trying to implement, and they're trying to implement the best-in-breed solution. And this is why we've same many systems integrators without actual hardware portfolios that are vendor agnostic seeing success. Same token, we're seeing new players in the marketplace. We're seeing the software firms gaining traction from a professional services standpoint. The firms gaining traction from a professional services standpoint. Being invited to the party, and sometimes just picking the primary vendor who has the infrastructure in place and on beyond that. So the other equation and what the vendors are doing in reaction to the marketplace is that they're not only aligning with very many firms, certainly to expand their portfolio coverage and enable them to successfully meet all the needs of a given client. They're also starting to make tuck-in acquisitions of switches that enhance their own portfolios, and at the same time, they take those smaller firms and remove them from the rivals' environment, so that ultimately clients come to them if they want that solution, or they've already been using that small tuck-in acquire firms, sources and programs and products to help them expand. Conversely, convergence is enabling those smaller firms to really go out and approach more of the marketplace. So it's a win-win situation from that standpoint, and it simply depicts that the environment is becoming very competitive, and all the vendors are trying to serve as many of the clients as possible. So going on to slide 16, excuse me. What we see, is that besides acquisitions, besides alliances, many vendors are developing, their portfolio of cloud services, cloud, and specifically cloud professional services. As part of this move and charge into the integration and implementation stage, one offerings that IBM has in terms of a migration service for smart cloud enterprises reevaluates the IT environment, helps select the workloads, best positions which ones to move to the cloud, and provides, from a professional services standpoint, strategy for the migration and leveraging automated delivery, which helps the client migrate to the cloud environment. And this is one example, and another one that I've also mentioned here below, which addresses specific needs here in the case of Atos, is where they have rolled out a test and acceptance management service. This effectively enables clients to run through a testing requirement. Well, they manage the testing requirements and then help move the project from development to production. On the equation, some of the vendors are very industry focused. Accenture is one of such case, and actually Accenture is beginning to offer some of its internal developed software as a service on an industry level. They're basically using their internal IT developed software to help specific industries in terms of purchasing those applications as a service. And it's basically, an attempt to become a full service provider and not only just provide the guidance and the professional services, but actually get involved in the services aspect of the marketplace. Accenture has partnered with Microsoft, so they're not ignoring the whole partnership model, and has become first authorized reseller of public health solutions on the Azure platform. Everybody has their own little specific niche that they're trying to move into. We're seeing it happening across the board. Deal breakers that we saw was certainly the issue regarding security as a pain point and a key area of concern. PSC is offering security as a service, not just as a professional service, but also offering it as a service, including identity management and cloud protection for email on the web. And this was developed through a strategic partnership with Symantec. It's a part of their overarching trusted cloud services portfolio. So what we've covered here, the last slide here. What's happening in the cloud marketplace, and especially with cloud professional services, they're growing quite dramatically. Engagements are increasing. The revenues from those engagements are increasing even at a more rapid pace as we move into integration and implementation and management. They're looking at ongoing revenue streams from the management side, as the vendors are. And across the board, firms are recognizing that they really want to purchase high-value services. What's driving the customers to buy, cloud professional services? The element is that there are so many offerings being put out there from a cloud services perspective. Nobody really knows everything about cloud and understands every cloud service to the nth degree. For clients, while some of them have very sizable IT staffs, themselves have limitations. And rather than building education just to figure out what cloud service you want to buy, finding that to them it's more cost effective to leverage a professional services firm who is eligible, who understands their business, and then help them implement a specific cloud service, and ultimately helping them in their transformation journey. The additional benefit is that the IT resources that the large enterprise may have can be spent on internal development and working on specific internal issues that can actually help them grow their business and improve satisfaction within the organization. How are the professional services vendors meeting demand? I give you a little smidget of some of the things that some of the professional services vendors are doing. We do a lot more in our analysis in the actual study. The overall arching theme here is that the vendors are broadening their cloud services portfolio, and they're broadening their own internal cloud services portfolio. So professional services as well as cloud services are somewhat marching hand in hand. They are leveraging internal development and continue to partner. Partnering has become really a requirement that every customer needs and wants to make sure that they can handle a multitude of solutions and a multitude of various products. So partners has become an essential ingredient and part of the process. Also seeing is that we've definitely found more new entrants into the cloud professional services space. Customer recognizing that even the largest systems integrators may know everything about their environment, and they then go to the specific events that may have some more in-depth knowledge around a area, are leveraging those relationships to help them in the whole cloud professional services process. I'm going to open some questions.
And as Ramunas said, this is time now to send your questions in. We had one that was specific to slide 9, Ramunas. So I'm going to take us back there to give you reference of what the question was in regards to. The question that came is, on slide 9, why does total cloud services add to more than individual cloud services?
Because clients are, client may buy multiple services. We ask, and this is the case, and actually we show it in more detail in the actual study results that are available. Many clients are not just buying software as a service, but maybe also buying platform as a service or infrastructure or a combination of one or two, sometimes three. And it's when we go on to the professional services side, the dominant factor is that many clients are really looking across the board and engaging professional services firms across all the practice areas that we've identified. So the percentages do not add up to 100% because we've basically identified the client as one, and if they're buying professional services, he's categorized as a one. And a single individual from the total sample, where each of the respect either cloud professional services or cloud services, they could have answered more than to that specific question.
The next question that's come in, is the APAC market evolving differently from U.S. and Europe in regards to expectations from professional services vendors?
That's a question. Yes, it is. We've seen a lot of growth in the APAC from the work we did in 2010, and one of the things that we're noticing is that the APAC market is much more solution-based focused. We're seeing across the board that APAC customers want a complete solution. They expect the cloud professional services vendor to deliver across the board and take care of everything. Part of this is as a result of the fact that many of the APAC clients are, in regions, they themselves are maybe as mature, do not have legacy environments in place. looking at the overall picture and trying to get a complete solution in place. That answers the question.
Great. Next question that's come in is a question on business platform as a service. What solutions are you seeing in the marketplace, and who are the leaders providing these services?
So, business platform as a service. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, business platform as a service. We're uptake in the marketplace. I don't have the complete list in front of me, but we didn't actually ask who specifically were the vendors in that marketplace as part of the study. We wanted to really get more or less a feel if there was take-up in the marketplace from that perspective. But we got to that level of granularity for the study in this round. That question actually has been raised a couple of times before, and it's certainly something we may look at in much more detail as we see business process in outsourcing growing dramatically, with companies trying to move their own business processes away or out of their own organizations. And it's an area that behooves us to dig deeper in the future. I'll get into the details for purposes of study, just from the standpoint of the length of the questionnaire within areas that we did cover.
I had a couple more questions that have come to those of you that we only have a few more minutes left. If we don't get to them today, we'll do a follow-up directly with you. The last question that we have time for is, since SaaS continues to lead in interest for clients as a cloud service, what specific workloads are clients trying to move to the cloud environment?
The one chart I had in here where we were identifying specific business processes, those are the ones that really are absorbing the focus from a software as a service standpoint. Top three, we're really looking at customer relations management. We're really trying to improve their own internal operations and maximize what they get from their own customers. Desktop productivity, really looking at some of the areas where we've seen take-up, a lot of take-up occurring in terms of email, web, and also business platforms such as your word processing and so forth. Trying to find mechanisms where that whole environment can move to a cloud environment. Trying to reduce the internal cost of buying thousands of software licenses where people do not necessarily use them on a daily basis, and trying to leverage cloud for that. The area that really is seeing a lot of attention from a process standpoint is really business analytics. Understand all the information that's occurring within and collected within an organization, and driving that out into something that's useful in terms of information. And what we think that it's so critical is that from an analysis standpoint of business information, there is a huge skill shortage that we're seeing in the marketplace. So business analytics, and especially from a professional services firm, and we know some firms already are providing not just the software and getting it up and running and helping create the dashboard, but actually participate in the analysis of the data. Helping firms actually analyze their own information and providing that as a professional service.
Looks like we're out of time. I know that there's some other questions in the queue. For those of you that are waiting for an answer, we will reach out to you directly with those follow-up answers. I want to thank you, Ramunas, for your time today, and thanks everyone for joining the call. I've enjoyed this interaction, and if you would like to get more information on getting access to the results of the study, please reach out to Ramunas. His email address is here. You can reach out directly to me as well. Before we sign off, we'd like to encourage you all to follow Ramunas and TBR on Twitter at the Twitter handles listed here, and to remind you to check out SlideShare and YouTube for replays of this webinar as well as others, as well as other content that we've been putting out into the market for your reading pleasure. We're going to leave the chat chat function open for another couple of minutes in case anyone has any last-minute questions they'd like to get in our queue for follow-up. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing with you guys shortly. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.